Oh boy. Did I switch to the right one? I think I actually did. I hear myself in the echo of my phone. It's just a two-shot. I don't have anything else that has less than that. So, like, only me and Cody this week, which is why you see wrestling on the screen. So don't turn off immediately. You saw the title. You knew what was going on. But with Sean having to go to Phoenix for work and Dave, we asked him just if he minded sitting out. He's around and could have done it, so it's not his fault. But, we had a whole challenge tier list a few weeks ago that I sat through dutifully. So instead, we're going to do another one that's even, well, I was going to say more niche, but that's not true. The challenge is about as niche as it comes.
Excuse you, that's the 5th professional sport of the United States.
Right, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Does it say something that these are the things that I can contribute to the most is fucking wrestling in the challenge?
It does
and
say
then
something.
And then when Sean wants to do fucking movies of the first half of the year, I'm like, yeah, man, I don't know. I've watched 2. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I think it says something. I don't know what it says, but it does say something.
Yeah,
well,
I don't know.
We're not going to fuck around a ton just because there's a ton of names on this list. We're not even going to try and get to them all. To be very clear, that's an impossible task. There are 300, and I'm going to be honest, I don't know what the fuck a Colin Delaney is.
I just noticed the exact same person, and I'm like, who is that?
Mm-hmm.
Is that ECW? So he must have been on ECW when WWE bought it out, I believe.
Right. So we have this whole list of a ton of people. What's lacking in this list is any like AEW, New Japan, TNA, unless they had WWE overlap. There is a decent amount of WCW, but of course that got folded into WWE, so that doesn't really count. And you'll also notice as I'm scrolling through that there are no women. So we're going to go ahead and cancel ourselves in advance, but do the tier list anyways.
I will get ahead of that by saying if we had the ability to, me and you would be ranking many of the, well, especially the current iteration of people pretty high, given the appreciation of that. I mean, a whole reason I decided to get back into wrestling, God, it's been about a decade now, is your positioning of telling me, hey, you're probably going to like this feud that was in the the original NXT at the time. And it indeed did draw me right back into watching wrestling. And it was a women's feud very specifically. So I would, be putting them quite high if we had the ability to.
I forgot I was responsible for that.
You were responsible for that.
Well, thanks for the credit and or blame.
Nah, it's mostly credit because I've now lived out the dream of my childhood to go to so very many live events as a result of that.
And as was once said by someone else who also has since been canceled, wrestling isn't good until like it is. There are plenty of times where like wrestling sucks, but then when it's great, it's really, really great. When a story pays off, when a long-term feud has a great match, like when it works, it's really great. And then sometimes there are just weekly episodes where you're like, what the hell did I just spend 2 hours on?
Yeah, and we are, using the last 3 shows, 3 shows that have existed in the past week for WWE, we are fucking rolling right now.
Yeah,
with what we've got
Vince
going.
McMahon is on this list, as is Triple H, and it's going to be interesting to see how recent developments affect their rankings, if they do at all. They will. But we have some tiers here that are not normally like what we see. We usually have like S, A, B, C, D, maybe an F. Instead, we have like, a few more here. And don't worry, Peter. We're going to cover a lot of classic wrestlers in this because I've been in and out of it. I used to watch them with my dad when I was a teenager. So like I know a lot about the Monday Night Wars and that era. Pre that, other than like the WrestleMania video game, like my 80s and beyond knowledge sucks. And my current knowledge comes in waves because I followed a lot around like 2010. Followed a lot like last year, but I haven't watched regularly almost ever. So a lot of this is from a distance, but I've also played a lot of video games. I know Cody's in the same boat there. Yep. So our tiers for the audio listeners, because it was probably tough to keep saying it, but we have Icon up top. Probably going to be a limited group. I think if we put any more than like 6 or 7 up there, we've made a mistake.
Yeah, I don't even know if it'll be that many.
Then it kind of just starts to dwindle downwards. There's still some really high stuff. Legend, superstar, draw, which in the wrestling parlance is just somebody who makes money for the company, so they popular, sell shirts, whatever. Over, another wrestling term, which just means, again, popular. Then mid-card, which is almost used derisively, but means mid, like it sounds. Inconsistent, which is an interesting next to last tier. But there's going to be some people who I can think of that fit there. And then jobber, which is basically the death sentence of a wrestler, is somebody who comes out, is supposed to lose, and doesn't get to do almost anything in like a 2-minute squash. So we're going to be ranking as many people as we can. We're going to have to go quick. We're not going to get to everybody. They're in alphabetical order, which is going to help me. So if there's anybody you really want to call out as we start, and then we can maybe look through what's left towards the end. So where are we going first? Because, we may want to do a big one or a bad one, I think.
Do you want to just get out of the way some of the major guys from the 90s?
Weirdly enough, I think we could start throwing in some like icon or legend level stuff pretty quickly without much debate. Because like The Undertaker is a fucking icon.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Is I would go and snag basically the top, those 3 or 4 or 5 guys from the Attitude Era, and start dropping them into the couple top spots here. And I think The Undertaker is probably a good place to start, given that he overlaps with, I would say, 4 different eras of wrestling, I suppose, in a way. Given the fact you go back to the early 90s there before that character really develops into what it became in the the late 90s when we have corporate ministry / corporate ministry and all of that nonsense and the Kane feud and things like that. I feel like, again, there's no debate there. He's at the top of the top.
It's because of everything with his character and what it became, the streak, but also like unreal athleticism for a guy his size, which nowadays you can see more of, but in the 90s?
Yeah.
A 6'10" guy who was built at 7 foot, spoiler alert, just like the NBA, everybody's taller than they really are in the WWE. But nonetheless, like a big dude, no doubt about it, who could jump over the top rope and walk along the ropes and all sorts of stuff. Like, to me, that's the easiest icon pick out of almost everything on this list because it's the combination of huge top talent and longevity.
Yeah.
That the other Attitude Era guys don't have.
Yeah, longevity. Again, he didn't go to Hollywood. He stayed healthy. Just unbelievably. I think that's what stands out the most is how much time did Taker miss? How many times does Taker off TV for about 20 years?
Not a ton. A couple little 4 to 6 month injuries over the course of it, but
and you talk about being able to balance that. Back in the 90s we had legitimate cruiserweight divisions, cruiserweight feuds. WCW did a really good job of that. It's actually what got me into wrestling was WCW's cruiserweight division. And then you watch Taker, and some of that is just he's doing stuff that the guys who are 190, 200 pounds and 6 foot max are doing. And again, I just don't know. No matter how much you love Austin and The Rock, and I don't know that anyone measures up from a pure wrestling standpoint.
Yeah, he could be my GOAT. I don't think he's a lot of people's picks, but I would give him a strong consideration for my best ever.
I think, me and you are kind of like-minded in that sense. Granted, I also have the feelings I have about The Rock in general. I'd have a hard time arguing it because when you think of feuds and major stuff, he's just there.
He's an icon.
Over.
He has to be an icon. I know you don't love him.
No, he has to be.
But again, I'll put him Undertaker just as I have respect for you. But not only has he transcended wrestling in a way that almost nobody else has, like Cena's almost like Rock light.
Mm-hmm.
Reigns has dabbled. Like Roddy Piper dabbled in the mainstream a bit. Like there's a few others, but he. Like the return pops he gets, it's him and Stone Cold, and that's really it. I know Taker's Gone got a huge hit this most recent WrestleMania too, but those are the two. And I might as well just bring Stone Cold up here. We'll talk about both, but they're going an icon. You talk about Mount Rushmore stuff. Those two are there. They're there. Wrestling has never been as big as it was in the Attitude Era. Yeah, and probably never will be.
I was gonna say, well, we have a gap there, the '80s, and I have some early '80s or late '80s knowledge. Well, we have that gap in knowledge, and we can understand that some of those guys are really big time deals. Wrestling isn't where it is in the 2024, getting billions of dollars from Netflix. If it wasn't for Taker to an extent, but really those two guys, the feuds they built together. Which again, I don't know if you want to do the Vince conversation at the same time since he's tied so deeply to both of them.
We will eventually
for these feuds, but. Yeah, again, Austin's career is a bummer. It took him a long time to go from, I would say, straight up mid-card to the icon status, and we are talking a 5-year run. Really, he's king of the ring in the late 90s or the mid 90s, and he's basically done by 2002.
Yeah.
And
The Rock's isn't too much wider for what it's worth, and he didn't even have the injury problems. It was more the Hollywood side for him, but both of them had basically 5 to 6 year primes, and that was it.
And if you'd like to look at perseverance, I think, in a way, and understanding guys are not going to get over, to use the wrestling term, and get the crowd behind them right away. The Rock was fucking hated when he started for the character that he brought out there. Boy, there are some really deep comparisons to the Usos and the grass skirts and things they wore to the current version of the Usos, who I think are going to go down as a Hall of Fame tag team. And to the early version of Rocky Maivia before it turns into The Rock with the Nation of Domination, the feud that really popped him. how much time is there between the Nation of Domination ending to him being fucking with Mankind and being part of the Vince feud? It's so tight.
Right.
It's skyrocketing.
Everything just flies so fast back then. When you look back at what a tight window it was, in the moment, it felt like everything took forever. But we had both Corporate Rock and Corporate Austin at points in there. Corporate Austin might have been in some way, I can't say his best version because the ass kicker who feuded with Vince is probably his most well known and best. But like my favorite version of Steve Austin is him being a bootlicking like cowardly heel.
Yeah,
he was funny as hell, and The Rock was kind of the same way. He could play any role. He could be the cool face. He could be the smarmy heel. He could be the funny guy. Like these are, to steal the baseball term, they're 5-tool players. They had everything. Like, could Austin really go in the ring even at the start of his prime with WWE? Not really. Even by then, the injuries had already taken his toll, primarily the pile driver he took that fucked up his neck, but also his knees were going. It doesn't matter. No one was ever as big as these three and one other person who's going to be really interesting to rate in a few minutes.
I was like, should we go ahead and grab my favorite wrestler of all time right now?
Well, I want to get one from the chat just because I want to keep them involved if they're going to tune along, which is this. Peter says, Bret Hart feels like an icon or legend status. I don't think I can put Bret Hart in icon. And maybe that's unfair because if Goldberg doesn't kick his head in, there's more of a career there at the top of the card than we got to see. But I do feel like I think he deserves to be in legend.
He's legend for sure. Now, there's a couple reasons why I think he gets held back from the rest of them. Again, unfortunately, for his sake, he's right there. You're right by Davey Boy.
Yeah, I was trying to get back in the right window.
Okay.
I know where he is, but
he is, unfortunately, in the sense of like, the phenom and all and what Rock and Austin's characters were. Brett's a little boring. Like I think like that is my only knock, and that's not saying he's like boring and I don't like him in any way. He just is a tad more boring than the rest of these guys because he's a very good technical wrestler. He and his family are the reason why we've got, I would say, 25% of the guys around now. I believe they've taken a lot of guys through their schools. So they deserve a lot of credibility for actually getting people to straight up wrestle, I think. And we don't pay attention to that point enough, or at least I don't think we did for years in the mid-2000s. And I think now you start looking at guys' technical ability to do things, and it starts to stand out a lot more. Maybe not in WWE, but you look at New Japan, and I feel like there's a lot of chain wrestling technical things like that the Harts knew what the fuck they were doing. And that's, to me, you say 5-tool, it's like Brett's like a full 4-tool guy, and that's the only thing that's missing.
Yeah.
If he was as good as he is shitting on the Goldberg as much as he is now, if he had that type of character and attitude when he was wrestling, he may actually have gotten pushed up higher.
Just didn't have the charisma.
Yeah.
At least not of these top tier guys. Again, he's in legend, so it's not selling him short. In this tier list, there's 8 tiers, so being in tier 2 is high.
Yeah.
But he just doesn't have that aura of the same people in the top row, which is why I can't put him there.
And he hit really bad timing in WCW as well, to an extent, if I'm thinking the timeline right.
Yeah.
Because he gets elevated up, and then the fucking NWO just takes over the company.
Yep.
And I feel like that really hindered him. And then Goldberg's streak is going.
Yep.
So he basically gets bypassed from what probably should have been the prime top level of his career, because the NWO is taking over and WCW is getting desperate with NWO and Goldberg, which are the two catches they were trying to get. Never mind all the weird shit that they did. We don't need to get in WCW's history, but he left the WWF or WWE and starts to kind of build up that card, and then gets capped by all that stuff. And I just think he never got to be able to.
And doesn't fit in. Whereas Sting gets caught in all that. Eventually, they have 18 NWOs, and that's a whole mess. But Sting gets elevated by the whole NWO situation. Goldberg has his streak. It's a whole separate thing that does intertwine at times. But you're right. Bret Hart got lost in the shuffle. It kind of happened for most of his career.
Yeah,
he was always going to be behind somebody, whether that was Hulk or Macho Man or Shawn Michaels or then some of the folks in WCW, and then he got his head kicked in and he had a stroke, and that all sucks for him. I don't blame him for being as bitter as he is, but I think even if it wasn't for that, I don't think he makes the top tier.
Yeah, I would agree. Again, I think charisma is the word you used, and again, charisma is what got The Rock and Austin to stop being mid-card joke characters and got them to iconic status for the 3, 4, 5-year run they were. Again, Taker's character helped that too. Bret doesn't have a ton of a character other than he's a really good technical wrestler. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the gimmick version of Undertaker being a zombie man who runs a graveyard or
and
whatever.
was unbeatable for a while there.
Yeah. Is,
But, I mean, without Brett,
thing.
there are other people we're going to be ranking on this list, like, let's say a Chris Benoit, a Dean Malenko, a Eddie Guerrero, who owe some of that success to Brett because he proved that you could be technical heavy and still make it work in a time when it was all about larger-than-life personalities, and Brett was not that.
Yeah, larger-than-life personalities or larger-than-life physical specimen human beings, basically.
Right. Yeah, literally larger-than-life or bigger-than-life personalities. Where do you want to go next?
I was going to go to my, let's just do it because it ties in so well with Brett. Let's go to Michaels, who is,
sure,
as I said, my indeed favorite wrestler of all time.
They're linked.
Yes.
I'm gonna drop him off here until we decide. I'm not putting him in over. He's clearly going to be higher than that. I'm just dropping him so we can talk.
And it's another example of someone who could have been an icon if a lot of things didn't happen in his career, I think, to be honest.
Some self-inflicted wounds.
Yes.
But also his back, which caused him trouble for 2 different stints that made him miss multiple years. Yeah, I think he's also, it sucks because he's one of my all-time favorites. My favorite match of all time is probably Taker HBK at WrestleMania 25.
Yep.
So, it sucks not to be able to put him in that icon status because there are some ways he's definitely ahead of Brett. But I also feel like it's fitting just to have them right next to each other in legend.
I think they're so linked. The hottest part of their acts is obviously the very notable Screwjob event of all of that. I think Michael's having matured, I think, in his life and gotten his life on track for, again, various different reasons. Honestly, he's probably alive today for those reasons, and I think we're lucky to have him around still. I want to say, influence wise, I think Michaels has quite a bit of an influence from the persona he had from, again, just his finishing move is just a super kick, which has been, diminished, I think, over the years because everyone uses it now. But guess what? He's kind of one of the main guys that was using it back then, and it was really, really popular and really fun for the shock value of all of that. So, and never mind the fact that he's also now been a pretty stable force. And it's not his wrestling career, but his impact is kind of carried over because he's still working today in the company. And again, you think about impact in terms of factions as well. We're going to get to so very many of those, but I talked about Nation of Domination very briefly. DX exists and is one of the funniest things I think that we've ever seen in our lives for the shit they pulled with WCW and trying all that. He wasn't part of a lot of those funnier parts. He's actually the iteration earlier that led to all of that. But you don't have that group without him there. And then you go back into, again, I think he's a draw with Marty Jannetty and only just furthered up from there. Again, Michaels worked closely with Kevin Nash / Diesel, Triple H. He has this impact where he's alongside a lot of these guys. He has a massive feud with Taker. He's alongside so many of the people that are going to be in the top of this thing.
Some really good and forgotten matches with Cena.
Yeah.
Just as Cena was coming into his own. It's tough. It's silly to think of it this way, but even just when I think of the individual moves that I think of, not only is just Sweet Chin Music good as a finisher, like you mentioned, but if I'm thinking of moves that stick out in my head, his Sweet Chin Music to Shelton Benjamin is one of the first 5 moves I'm going to Edge's spear off the ladder.
Yeah.
The RKO on Seth Rollins from Orton at WrestleMania. Those are on a very short list of things where I think of an iconic move that sticks out in my head.
Yeah.
And so I think Legend is the highest he can go. He might end up at the top of Legend, but I think it's a good spot for him.
The one last thing I'll say is WWE did a really good job, and they're getting back into this now, in which there's a world that exists in the locker room. Everything doesn't have to happen in the ring. It happens in the locker room. It happens backstage. Holy shit, if Shawn Michaels doesn't have some of the funniest moments to me in history of his charisma being backstage fucking around. One of them just got recently brought up because Jordan Grace bought him a chef's hat when he goes and off-screen super kicks a child. It is funny shit. He's talking to Triple H, arguing he super kicks whatever the guy's name is. He's like, oh, look what you made me do to this guy because he got pissed off. Michaels' charisma in that Attitude Era was really fucking good.
Yeah, and kind of underrated now, I think, in hindsight.
And that's what made. And then again, as a kid, he was so funny, along with having a great ring ability. That's why he became my favorite wrestler ever. It's been so hard to surpass that with how good he was expanding what the world of wrestling was in the kayfabe universe.
Yeah. I want to tackle two controversial ones. While we're still thinking about the 90s, we might as well put them up in unison. Because one is Hulk Hogan. Just going to bring him up here next to Adam Cole for a moment.
Baby.
And one is Vince McMahon. We've alluded to it. We might as well tackle both because in a large part, like obviously Hogan's career extends before and after Vince, but two highly charismatic, very influential, and important people in wrestling history, and yet also ones with significant flaws. Let's go Hogan first. In the case of Hogan, I don't think there's a bigger icon in the history of wrestling than Hulk Hogan.
No, there's just not.
Like, we talked about other people who transcended it, made it to Hollywood. Obviously, Hulk is the blueprint for that, even though he never made it big in Hollywood. We've got several Hulk-specific movies. He's got the obvious like cameo in Rocky 3. Like, Hulk Hogan is a massive fucking deal and basically carried all of the 80s, and you can argue the damn near all of the 90s.
Yep.
But he's also a racist. And his relationship with his daughter is problematic, and he put himself before everybody else in whatever company he was in. So, like, where the hell do we put Hulk Hogan?
I mean, I left out the critique of Michaels in terms of backstage politicking and things like that. He's very guilty of that. You want the best example of being guilty of it? Holy shit, here it is. I mean, the man who just pretty much, ruined. I mean, he doesn't deserve all the blame for WCW, but he deserves a fair amount, I think, in a way.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, are we taking character points away for where they're, where they are, or is this list solely just their influence? Because he's icon if we're not taking away points for all the other shitty parts about him.
Right. Peter says, can't forget about awkward MTV show, This Family. Yeah.
Oh my
God.
Yes.
Is a detraction. Yes. I think we have to take it as a whole.
Okay.
So, like, I know that's a little bit awkward in some cases, but, like, I can't put Hulk Hogan in my icon tier, even though he deserves it just for certain aspects of his wrestling career alone. But then I don't know where to put him if it isn't the top.
I would say...
Like, how much does it punish him?
I would say, I think from our perspective, given our ages, is that he also just got incredibly stale near the back end of his career. There's not a lot of advancement. He starts to get old. Again, to be real, he was never the wrestler that any of the, maybe Austin, but he's never the wrestler of the caliber of Hart or Michaels or Taker at all. I mean, it's the 80s thing. It's the very carny type. Oh, the big guy, is big and strong and takes out the bad Russian guy or the bad big French Andre the Giant guy, whatever it is.
And hulking up is just no selling.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. I was like, if we want to get into the actual, like, really nitpicky level of what wrestling works today, Hogan doesn't work today. He's an example of an era that's really far gone in what wrestling was. Here's the catch: is you can't be overexposed when you were on TV once a week, maybe, or once a month, or whatever it was. When you're at your regional thingy, and then working up to WWE, and finally getting onto TV. He finally got onto TV, and then he turns heel with the NWO. And how fucking stale did that get? How quickly?
Yeah, they ran into the ground, like a lot of things in WCW.
Yes.
So to me, and we can move him. I have him in superstar.
I think if you take the back end of the career that I'm critiquing and then you take a lot of the personal stuff, I think he starts to drop all the way down there. I agree with you.
I can't put him any lower. He's fucking Hulk Hogan. So I know some people hate him so much they'd probably throw him in jobber. I think that's stupid no matter how much you despise everything that we just talked about with the negatives. It's Hulk Hogan. When he dies, it's going to be a massive problem.
Yeah.
As far as like, all right, we got to celebrate him, and we're also going to have to acknowledge some elephants in the room.
Yeah, and I mean, again, the WWE, I will tell you, hasn't done a great job of that. In fact, as I just watched Raw, what was it, yesterday, they're advertising him among 15, 16 other wrestlers for a big event thingy in New York City. He's still getting bumped into that, and I'm like, holy shit, and he's been gone and non-existent, and they're shoehorning him into this now.
Stopped right as I stood up, turned on the fan.
Sorry. So I would agree. That's where I would put him as well.
I have him there. Jack Rock mentions, like, if not for Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair in particular, they put wrestling on the map. I get it. It's just how much of Hulk Hogan's career post, like, 1987 or 88 is his own ego and politics fueling his constants at the top of the card.
Yeah.
And maybe that was deserved. Again, he was so huge that it made sense for him to be there. I don't know, because again, even at the end of the career, you think about his match with The Rock at WrestleMania, turning an entire crowd in, again, one of the biggest matches of all time. So, like, deserves his flowers for sure. can't put him any lower. Yeah, a draw is such a massive understatement. I could see Legend if you don't mind his personal stuff so much. I have him in Superstar.
That's fine with me.
Vince.
Is
everything we just said about Hulk but worse.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I would also argue Vince ain't shit without the wrestlers around him. Vince A can't wrestle. Let's just be real frank.
Yeah, even at his best, he was below average.
And it's mostly just ballooned up by infinite amounts of steroids that somehow have not killed him to this day. I don't know how, with however many wrestlers have heart attacks. Vince has just persevered. I mean, it seems like it's the example of selling your soul to the devil in human current day form is pretty much what he is. If you don't have The Rock, or let's say you don't have Taker where he does corporate ministry, you don't have The Rock where it's just corporate Rock running around and Vince basically being like the Paul Heyman to The Rock's Brock Lesnar in that way. You don't have Austin as the foil, which again provided for very, very many things. I mean, again, bonking him on the head with the bedpan is again one of the funniest fucking things that we've ever seen. But so much of it is that he did need the foil of all those wrestlers. Now, good for him because his company helped those guys get over and become popular. But those guys also had feuds that were popular that didn't always include him. He always needed one of the main card guys as the way and also was never going to put on some amazing match.
If I was going to put a GIF up on the screen, it would be of him dancing on the stage and doing that performance where he's singing and stuff, and it just kind of looks goofy and silly. Hulk's on guitar in the background, actually. I mean, the giant elephant in the room here is, of course, the allegations against him that I don't even know if are allegations anymore at this point, where God knows what sexual depravity he was into and what he was using his position of power to force upon other people. Just the insights that we got into some of the affidavits and testimony was pretty gnarly. And coupled with the fact that I think you're right. He happened to be there at the perfect time. And he was a really good foil for Stone Cold in particular at the very tippy top of wrestling. I don't know that many other people could have pulled that off in the way he did just because he was so easy to hate. And so many wrestlers struggle with being purely hated.
Yeah.
I'm going to put him in inconsistent unless you stop me. Because I don't want to put him in jobber, despite how much I think he deserves to be slammed for the events of the last year in particular. But inconsistent, at least you can be like, yeah, he was good for a stretch, but even in his career, he was kind of inconsistent as a broadcaster and as an authority figure. And then some nasty stuff happened that could be at best good and bad.
I mean, because when we talk about, again, we talk about how, you look back, how condensed everything is. Vince's peak is about 3 years, if that.
Pretty much.
It spans the 90, I can't remember, I'm going to mess up the years, maybe the 98 Rumble to the 2001 Rumble, 2000, whatever it is in there, which when Austin, won, 2 of 3 or 3 of 4, whatever the fuck it was.
And Vince won one.
Yeah, again, he had himself win one.
Yeah. But by the way, the stuff with Linda McMahon in retrospect does not hold up well at all.
No. I mean, again, we could look back through the late 90s, early 2000s, and a lot of it is not good, especially with any woman that's involved, which is, of course, hilarious as we celebrate, rightfully so, we celebrate Lita and Trish now, as if we didn't objectify the shit out of them over and over and over again for years.
Right. And as we celebrate by not having any women on this tier list.
Yeah, exactly.
We didn't make it, but still.
But thankfully, a lot of the current day women's wrestlers, have embraced them and don't look down on them for the shit they got forced into fucking doing. But Vince is responsible for a lot of negative shit. We could pop all this positive stuff, again, which is condensed into a couple years, but his just harm. I have so many fucking things. I mean, again, I probably would have, even if he was like scot-free of all this negative gross shit, I'd still be like over. Over is where I'd put him because, again, he doesn't wrestle. This is a fucking wrestler tier list. He's a personality, but he's not really a wrestler, so I'm not going to fucking put him high.
Right. I think inconsistence right for him. Jobber's going to be for afterthoughts.
Yeah.
And he's not an afterthought.
Or lost potential, blown potential, any of those type of things.
Which we're not even going to have the time to put the 2/3 of this list that might go into that category.
Exactly.
We're just going to skip them. So if you don't even make it to jobber status, that's really damning. Okay, I picked those two. Where do you want to go next?
Well, I mean, I was going to go through the A's. I wanted to get Andre the Giant out of the way, but he's actually not on this list. Oh, there he's right there. Duh. So Andre feels like, it sounds sad, but again, for a lot of the reasons I've already used, over feels like where he would actually go, or maybe the one right above over. Because again, he's a foil to a lot of things. He's limited in what he can actually do. Draw is actually probably the right way. Draw is the best word for him, honestly, because he went from territory to territory for a little bit. As a draw, you bring him in, he's the big evil guy, and then you have Hogan's career with him. But again, unfortunately, not to any fault of Andre's himself, but his peak of that is how long was he really on major parts of TV? Like he doesn't make it far enough in. He obviously actually does have probably any Hulk Hogan acting role is probably beaten by Andre's.
Potentially. Obviously, we know of one movie in particular.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, Andre, I think draw feels right. But again, from a wrestling standpoint, Andre can't do a whole lot of things. We have plenty of documentaries explaining exactly why. But the fact that the man got to that point anyways, was able to put on, be in a ring, do the things he did, and be as powerful as he was, and then spawn a fake child, I guess, with the Giant or Big Show.
Sure.
Shows his impact. But I just feel like draw is pretty much as high as I can go with that.
I couldn't go higher than Superstar, so if you have him there, I'll probably acquiesce. Just because, the timing sucks. Obviously, because he was just so massive, it's hard to fault him, like you said, for any mobility issues or the injuries that he was suffering and just his body wearing down in general. It does feel like if he had somehow managed to land, say, like in between Hulk and Bob Backlund or something, that he could have had like a 3-year run as a champion, running through the territories, being huge, throwing people around. But his timing didn't work out right because he ran smack dab into Hulk Hogan.
Yes.
Which was kind of like, a ton of golfers that ran into Tiger or whatever, right? Where it's like you ran into an era where there was an A1 that was clearly above everybody else. Hell, Macho Man had this to a lesser extent, who we'll get to. It's the same idea where it's like, if you'd been in a different time, you might have been massive. But unfortunately, other than his actual size, his career never really reached that height.
And I'm okay bumping him to Superstar if you want to. I don't have any real qualms with that. I think draw is just where I was thinking of the terminology and things like that to what he is.
Chuck Rock, I know you're older than us, and I'm not going to give you flack because obviously it's just opinions and all that. But Icon to me has to be reserved for the basically 4 or 5 best, and Andre the Giant I don't think can make that cut with some of the massive icons that are in this industry.
Again,
I know you weren't here at the start, so I'm saying we're keeping that list tight. I know there's already 3 up there. I don't know if anybody else is going to make it up there. I'm going to be very honest. We'll see.
I also just have a different viewpoint of wrestling. And that's what I started by saying. 70s and 80s wrestling isn't the same type of wrestling to me because of the difference in exposure and what you need, I suppose, in terms of versatility and variance of things. I don't look back on Hogan Giant matches or Andre matches. I don't give a shit. I'm going to be honest. It's not it's not for me because the mystique of that doesn't work in today's day and age with I'm not there for the story. So 100% I can acknowledge that I can't get behind what led to those moments, but also matches aren't good. I'm just going to be real frank. And I go with that I don't think a lot of Austin and The Rock's matches are good. I think the moments are big. I don't think the matches themselves are good. It's just like football. You can talk about how good guys in the 70s and 80s are. I promise you almost every dude modern day is better than all those guys were because people scientifically
We've
and
kind of
athletically.
had that discussion a bit when you try and compare eras in any sport. It's almost a stupid endeavor because, there is no question that NBA players today are more talented than they were in the 70s. Relative to era and all that stuff is a whole other discussion. But, nobody can do what Giannis does today, even if you don't like Giannis. And I'm not even a big fan. There is no Giannis in the 1960s. Yeah. He would have scored 700 points a game.
If you throw... I'll just throw this name out there. You throw Will Ospreay out there. Hey, people are going to be like, what the fuck is this man doing in the 70s and 80s? But also, no one's doing that.
Yeah, and I get it, because a lot of the stuff in the 80s was more story-driven. It felt more fresh because you didn't have an overexposure of the television product where now it's again, super kicks are everywhere and flippy stuff is everywhere and all that stuff. I get it. And so we weren't around for that era, so it is going to lean a little more modern. But then again, we're also topping it with 90s and early 2000 folks and not current ones.
Yeah, and again, I can absolutely acknowledge that the humor aspect of wrestling is what got me into it, so I'm going to lean a lot more towards shit like Michaels did, like Austin did, spraying people with a beer truck. Those moments are hilarious to me because I don't take wrestling overly seriously. Mm-hmm. And in the 80s, they needed to. At that point, it's projected as an actual sport.
Right. Kayfabe is king.
Yeah, we've leaned into the fact that this is all a fucking joke for the most part now. And you can see that in the personalities we have today.
And you had to, by the way.
Yeah.
They fought tooth and nail against it, but in the internet era, there was only so much time you were going to keep that genie in the bottle.
Yeah, and the Attitude Era captured that, and there was the last little bit of that before it was over.
Yep, pretty much. I moved Andre up to Superstar for the audio listeners, just to put alongside Hulk. I think that's fair. I do think that's fair, because obviously, massive impact. I think he has to be below Hulk, so he can't go any higher, but I want to tackle a more modern one just to mix things up a bit because we want a lot of retro stuff, and I think that's good because they're going to be some of our highest performance. And then Vince, I want to tackle the 3 from the Shield.
Okay, that's probably.
So
a good
I got to
touch.
go down here and grab them all. That's going to be Roman, which is an R, and here's Seth. I just saw him, so I'll grab him. Look at his dumb face. There's Seth.
You didn't have
Dean
to say
Ambrose is up here.
That. You didn't have to say dumb face.
Not his name anymore. Dean's face is also stupid for the audio listeners. And then Roman. Where is Roman? Oh, he's up here. He's out of alphabetical order. That's why I can't find him, because they fucked it up.
Was he under Big Dog?
He was just early R's. He was after like Rene Dupree.
What was R.E.? They were doing last name.
I guess they are flipping between first.
Because Heath Slater's down there.
That's weird. I didn't really look that closely at it. I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, that's why.
So Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns. Now, it might seem like blasphemy to even be considering them. They're not going an icon, let's be very clear up front. To even consider them for legend status probably feels like sacrilege, and yet we're looking back at the Wyatt and Shield feud because of the current day stuff with the Bloodline and the reformed Wyatt 6 that just started a couple weeks ago with Bo. And then you realize that feud was 10 years ago.
Fuck.
And you start to go, oh shit, these guys are all approaching like 15-year careers now.
Yeah.
So I don't think I can put any of them in legend. I believe we'll look at the group list afterwards just to compare the top couple tiers, if nothing else, not all 300. I think the public has all 3 of them in legend, and I don't think I can go that crazy, but I think they have to be superstar at minimum. At the very least, Rollins and Reigns do.
You're gonna make me argue for Roman being under legend. I can't fucking believe you're gonna make me do this.
Argue for it, as in favor of it, or put it in legend?
I look at Roman's matches and the whole Bloodline thing, and my number one critique was this is the same fucking match, and for you claiming that this is some big long amazing streak, it's interference over and over again. That's not Roman's fault. I'm not gonna fault him for the manner in which his matches were booked over and over and over again, to where to me it got really stale. But to have that reign from basically COVID into this WrestleMania, where he does indeed dispatch every single fucking major guy who, a lot of guys who are going to be superstars or draws from this modern day era, and some that one day might be under legend, over and over and over again, and has, I mean, however many days that was, and main events, all this shit, and I believe Roman's career as a whole is probably winding down already. At least, I mean, it already was. Granted, the last year and a half of the Bloodline, the fucking title was barely on TV. I feel like Roman cemented his space under legend, especially because for all the people who were worried about where Cody Rhodes would be by taking over the belt, look at the 2 European crowds we've had so far, and tell me that Cody's not over. And Roman's a big part of that.
Yep.
Roman is a massive part of carrying the company out of one of the most challenging times in its history through COVID. Pops out, builds this streak. They generate a massively, really fucking good story early on with the Bloodline. I'm in no position to say the early and mid part of that story was bad. It started to get stale after the Mania I went to, 39, only because I just don't think we had a lot of direction of where we were going next, and he was also not on TV for a chunk of time. But he carried that company out of COVID. Not necessarily in COVID. Granted, he was gone, rightfully so, given his health diagnosis. But I don't know how many fucking guys in the company could have done that, and to flip from being a face that no one wanted to cheer for to a heel that everyone fucking wanted to cheer for. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, and his babyface return is going to be massive.
It is. It's going to be massive.
The We Want Roman chants are deafening.
Yep.
They're positioning Heyman perfectly for that. They'll probably do new Bloodline versus old.
Yes.
That's all setting up to be a really good cap to it. I think you're right. I think that's going to be the last year or two of his career, just given his age, because they've all been around for a while. All of them are hovering around 40 plus.
Yep.
So, like, if you want him in legend, I'm okay with the bottom of legend.
I just think he has to be there for what we get.
And I know, again, it's weird to have him above Hulk Hogan, but we talked about why. It's not just wrestling or apex or status. It's the off-the-field stuff.
You moved into the top line.
Oh, yeah, put him at the top. It's off-the-field stuff that hurts Hulk Hogan. Again, he's the A1 icon if none of that stuff exists.
And again, never mind the Rock's, cancer diagnosis and working back from that. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you'd want to cheer for Roman, and then again, anyone at the top of the card for 3 or 4 years gets stale and it gets annoying. Other than, I mean, I guess 25% of the crowd or so that was still nonstop cheering for him. I just don't know how many people could have pulled that off. Again, Paul Heyman, obviously not a wrestler. Paul Heyman would be up right next to him for everything he did to assist that entire storyline. But that's where I put him. And then I have to put the other two guys, again, one step down in Superstar. I just can't put them as equal with Roman. While I'm currently wearing a Seth Rollins t-shirt, and Rollins is my current modern day favorite wrestler without fucking fail.
I can't live in a world where he's behind Hulk Hogan. Again, we've talked about Hulk. But I can't put him in legend, even though these last 2 years in particular, I think have elevated him to at least the conversation about it. He's never been the guy.
No.
I just don't think you can be in legend or icon unless you were the guy.
And
not one of the guys, not right next to the guy. I think you have to be the guy.
You talked about being there at the wrong, right place at the wrong time for Bret Hart, for Andre. Rollins is going to fall right into that. The one saving grace for him is the fact that, again, Roman included, no one has put on a string, at least in the WWE. I should get that very clear, in this company specifically. No one has put on a stretch of fucking great match after great match after great match to where you could put the belt on him. You're going to get a great opening match because he's not in the main event because Roman's got the main event match tied up. Over and over again, Rollins is helping television, not PLEs or pay-per-views, whatever the fuck we want to call them. Rollins was helping TV day in and day out be at least watchable. When he is putting on, I'm going to defend the belt on this night, or I would open challenge, whatever it might be. Apart from again, I think Rollins' personality and character is grating to a lot of people. I find him hilarious. So I'm biased. So I'm going to lean into he does a lot of the goofy-ass, very Michaels-esque, nonstop, weird, wacky shit that helps me like, wow, this is fucking weird, but I can entertain. I'm entertained by it.
But he's coming to his own.
Yeah.
With this last iteration, and that's one of the things I think he deserves credit for. He's been chameleon-like in his moveset and his personality, to where when he was just like, Triple H's lackey, corporate kind of Seth Rollins, and like he has his two other lackeys for him, and blah, 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 J&J Security. Like, I don't think it really works, but now it's clear, like, he commands a crowd. He can work as a face or a heel very easily. And like you said, it sort of worked the last few years because he was always on TV when Roman wasn't. And I can cut Roman some slack because of the leukemia and all that stuff made sense. But Seth also carried the company the last few years. Yes. Not in the way Roman did, so I think this placement's good for him. I'm a big fan, but I can't put him in legend. And I don't know if I can put Ambrose in Superstar.
So that's where I was going to go. Ambrose is in a weird spot because Ambrose is probably the champion in WWE during a time when I would assume most people are going to look back and say that's basically the worst time because it's pre-COVID. It's one of the worst time is a harsh thing, but least interesting times because he's in the gap of Cena winding down, Roman having not been embraced, been pushed as he was, but not really embraced in the same way. Ambrose to me is like, because his main feud I remember is Styles, conveniently, who's pictured right next to him there. Styles and him had a good feud. It's perfectly fine. There's some weird antics to that. Ambrose again also has a pretty good sense of humor, is funny, quips on some weird things.
Mm-hmm.
But he's chosen a different path, and all power to him for what he's doing. I mean, I just watched him get spun around and do a fucking ring post because he's psycho. And,
right, the blood sport thing.
Yeah, and I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned about him long term for how he's going to age and what's going to happen to him.
Yeah, and Renee Paquette also probably concerned long term.
Exactly. So I mean, draw as you were kind of hinting at makes sense because he's a draw for a different subset of audiences right now. He has gone off to do the things he wanted to do and wanted to accomplish in his wrestling career. That just doesn't jive the same with superstar or legend status. And again, if he stays in the WWE, you can not like the WWE, whatever. It's the biggest company. It's the one that's going to get people over the biggest. It's going to make them the most famous. It's going to make them the most money. Thankfully, that is still the case even with Vince McMahon gone, who is terrible to all these people. And Dean or Moxley has just chosen a different version of that. And when he was there, because again, I mean, you look at the Shield as a whole, I'm not trying to belittle anybody, but isn't he the weakest link of the three?
Yeah. The best promo.
Yes, absolutely.
But also the worst worker, and that's saying something with Roman.
Yes.
And unfortunately, fair or not, see, it's like a lot of people, like we talked about with Hulk or whomever, people in Cena's shadow. We'll get to Orton here soon, I think. They didn't get the opportunity. And Ambrose did. At a bad time, and maybe he wasn't even given a fair shake when he did. Like the things with Jericho were well documented.
Yeah.
The stuff with Brock Lesnar, who's another super fascinating one for this, are well documented. But when given the opportunity, it didn't work. Whether that was his fault or not doesn't really matter to me. I like Dean Ambrose. I don't, again, putting him in draw is still like 4 out of 8 here on a list where there's going to be a lot of people in like the overish spot.
Yep.
But I just don't think, I think they need to each be in their own tier. I
agree. I mean, I don't even know if he'll ever come back to the WWE. I don't know if he'll even, but the things he wants to do, the deathmatchy type stuff, the Bloodsport stuff, it's just different. I also don't know that, Roman's not doing that type of shit, but it's his version of what he wants to do in wrestling. And that's, to me, what equates to being a draw. That works really well to draw a crowd. You can put him in a main event of whatever crazy PLE pay-per-view special event it is. People are going to be entertained by it, but it's not going to be quite the same as the WrestleMania moment that Roman has had multiple times.
To his credit, because we're not going to talk about AEW much here, because most of the people on the list are not, he has come back to be champion multiple times when the company needed him to, because they know he's a reliable hand who at least is a good draw. Not a great draw, not a huge name, but they've known that either when Hangman got hurt or when the whole stuff with Punk happened, whatever, that, okay, this is a guy we know can carry it for a while. And he's been willing to come out of vacation in one of those 2 occasions and be like, yeah, sure, if that's what you need, I'll do it. So he deserves credit. I just don't think he can be on that tier.
If AEW, which I believe they will, if AEW has a 34-year staying power as a company, Dean's going to, I mean, we look to certain guys as the reason why it started and this and that. Dean, John, whatever, is going to be a huge fucking reason that company survives and extends its stay for a long time, which deserves credit.
Yeah. All right, I picked the Shield. You go where we're going next. I like doing these in tandem. That's kind of working out well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to do this because you referenced it for multiple reasons. Can we, I mean, we can drop some guys into mid-card here, too. Let's bring up the Wyatt family. Let's do all 4.
I think we're going to look at like 9-ish, going speed run-ish for the last 15, 20 minutes. We're going to have to. And even then, we may not get to everybody. We may have to leave this for later because we're at an even slower pace than I thought we would be. And I still feel like we've been rushing because there's so much to talk about.
Yeah. So I would go.
So we need Bray.
Yeah, go Bray.
Who, by the way, is in Legend for the group vote. And I'm like, I don't know about that, guys.
So
Bray, and we're going to need Eric Rowan. So it's an E. There he is with his big old bald head.
And then you go Luke Harper.
And we're going to need Luke Harper in his dirty-ass T-shirt.
There he is
with his big old eyes.
And then Braun Strowman.
I guess we need Braun Strowman, who I don't even really know how I want to rank, but I have an idea.
I have an idea, too. So let's
the Wyatt
go.
family, go ahead.
Let's go lowest to start here.
Okay.
Rowan's career is not done yet.
No. He's in the new version.
Yes, he's in the new version. And I'm actually very intrigued because we just had a great promo last night on Raw for whenever you're listening to this.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great promo that helped build Bo Dallas or Taylor Rotunda.
Is Bo here? I bet he is.
He is. He's right over there. If you want to,
I'll put him in the list. We'll get to him last.
Yeah, I mean he's gonna
I'm not gonna put the others that are in that right now, but Bo can fit here.
I promise you, Bo's going to inconsistent
because Bo was still doing a few things with Bray before his passing and blah blah. So, anyways, go ahead.
So Rowan's career here is just getting going. Rowan has unfortunately, just as Dean Ambrose has been, but probably to an even greater extent, been the afterthought of all this. He's the one that got released and now brought back. I can't wait till he has a mic in his hand or video recording like Bo Dallas just got to hear from him.
Mm-hmm.
He's a secondary thought in the Bludgeon Brothers over and over and over again. And again, this is what happens in a lot of these factions. This is why the Shield's so special, is draws the worst they did here. Most of these factions are going to have someone down around mid-card, which I think is where Rowan is right now. But I'm really intrigued what they're going to do, because the one thing I'm stressing with the Wyatt 6 that we're doing now is you better put these fucking people over. I don't want it's basically 5 people who've been borderline mid-card to jobber status. You better not treat them like that if you're going to give them all the presentation that we're doing. So Rowan feels like inconsistent in a way, but also he is just straight up a mid-card wrestler. I mean, he's been a tag champ. I don't think he's ever even held solo gold, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think he ever got the IC belt or the US belt.
I think he did, which is why I'm going inconsistent, but probably high up in it. Just because I think we're going to have a lot of good wrestlers mashed into over in mid-card, and I don't think he belongs there. We can move him later.
And so I'm going to jump to Strowman for now, who, boy, we talk about, again, staying power and all that. How Strowman's whole fun angle of being an unstoppable force and all that was what? A year and a half? 2 years?
Maybe. Some fun run-ins in that span.
He's a mid-card wrestler right now.
With Brock, with Roman, I think he's mid-card. I know some people would say over because he was a big deal for a short stretch, but again, maybe not his fault, but never really won anything. Never really did anything.
Got released.
I know. So how good could he have been? He hasn't really done much since coming back.
Yeah, he's a mid-card wrestler.
I'm not a huge fan personally.
Yeah. I mean, that's where he belongs.
Bo Dallas goes in jobber, by the way.
Yes.
Sorry, Bo.
Again.
But I don't believe, and maybe he's going to drag himself out of that with this new Wyatt 6 angle, but right at this moment, he's a jobber.
But if you think back to Bo Dallas last time you were on TV, he was literally in a tag team called the B Team.
Yep.
That was the last time you really, really saw him with a man who does no... His tag team partner no longer wrestles and is already a producer for the WWE, by the way. Bo, if we were talking about only NXT career, well, Bo's a fucking icon in the level of early NXT.
Sure.
But guess what? That level of things doesn't really matter in the same sense right now. Boy, his career and Seth Rollins' career, which, again, there was differences building into this, but they are basically the two of the early main guys on the version of NXT to start, and they went drastically different directions.
Sure did.
So Bo, I'm hoping, is going to get to over here very shortly because he did just probably have, to me, the best promo, whatever you want to call it, of his career.
Yeah.
Just happened.
And it had to be, and he nailed it.
And he fucking nailed it. And I can't wait till he's in the ring and we see what he's doing live and not in a pre-recorded segment.
Yeah.
Luke Harper.
By the way, he sounds like Bray.
Of
course he does, but it's different now that Bray's dead.
Yeah, that was...
Like it's chilling in a good way.
Chilling's the perfect word. That's perfect word. That promo was chilling to see them and then be very raw and have that real emotion. I can't wait to revisit this in however many months and we get to bump him up to mid-card or over because I don't believe he's going to be the world champion. I don't think you need to put the Wyatt 6 in the belt thing. It's what killed Bray's momentum was actually making the weird psycho people want titles. Why do they want titles? They just want to hurt people. Well, the best place for hurting people is over because you get a big pop, you beat the shit out of some people, and then you move on. That's what you do. So Harper, again, we're robbed of so very much of what a career was. A, because he was stuck on the independent scene, not cast correctly, overlooked for so fucking long. But there is so much, and I might get shit from this from you, there is so much Undertaker skill set in the ring for what Harper could do. And it took me... He
was the main reason I liked watching the Wyatts in the ring.
It took me...
Bray was good. But Harper was another level.
It took me way too long to get an appreciation for that. And then you start watching and you're like, holy fuck, man, this guy can go. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad for as brief a time as it was that AEW really started to just put him over heavily when he made the choice to leave the WWE and go over there. We got robbed of what was probably going to be a major high up the card in AEW. Again, another reason why Dean Ambrose was crucial. They lost someone like Luke. And so I don't know how much higher I can go than mid-card is the only bummer.
I have him in over.
Okay. And I think that's
because
a good call.
I know we're lining up the Wyatts vertically, and I do think Bray's got a case for draw.
Yeah.
But I think the AEW run was telling. And I think, look, this is silly to an extent. No one ever said a bad fucking thing about Luke Harper. In a business where a lot of people go into business for themselves, in an industry where people are constantly at each other's throats because there's only so many spots and so many champions. Even before he died, no one had a goddamn negative thing to say about Luke Harper.
And then when he passes away and you see the influence he had on guys you had no fucking clue he was as close to as he was, like Cody Rhodes, like Big E. Again, we don't need to dive too into it. He's subtly on the Up Up Down Down channel for years. He was off screen, never mentioned, but he was actually on the fucking channel as a voice over and over and over again. He was their commish, as they called him, which they finally revealed, I think, years later. Having seen Luke wrestle live a couple times before he left the WWE, I don't know how many times I've seen a guy that the crowd wanted to cheer for and just needed to be given a reason or a placement on the card to cheer for him. And I believe it was around the Intercontinental. I think he had the Intercontinental belt for a little bit of time, if I'm not mistaken, or was at least in the hunt for it. And he started to really get people over without even fucking talking on TV.
Mm-hmm.
It was just the vibe he put off with what he could do in the ring. And so, I'm happy with putting him right there and over.
I think I like it. We can always move him down later because I think he's either over or mid-card. And then Bray, another career cut short.
Yeah.
And what he did with the Firefly Funhouse was super interesting, kind of revitalized everything. The Fiend, of course, is part of the Bray Wyatt package. And I didn't really love most of that, especially as it wore on, because it became like 27 finishers and red lighting and a whole bunch of shit I just didn't care for personally. I think I have him at top of draw. I can't put him in Superstar.
No, I think that's
I can't
fine.
do it, but I have him above Ambrose, which might be controversial for some. And these aren't ever going to line up like this further down the road when we move things around. But like, I can't put him in superstar. I can't do it.
I mean, I think, but I mean, again, for not personal reasons at all, I can't think of a more polarizing guy recently. Because I think you already kind of hinted at it. Luke was a better wrestler. As we're being real frank, Luke's a better guy in the ring from a moveset standpoint, from an intriguing standpoint. Bray's body type is different than so very many guys, and he just deserves a lot of credit for turning himself from fucking Husky Harris into what the Bray Wyatt character was. And I've been going back and actually rewatching early NXT stuff, as I hinted with Bo Dallas and Seth Rollins. Man, Bray is so fucking cool. When that character first debuted, and he doesn't have the full mystical superpowery thing, and he's just a cult leader who on the mic is borderline unparalleled.
Hawaiian shirts, rocking chair.
Yeah.
Super interesting. Doesn't care about titles. Like you said, just hurts people.
Yeah.
That was the best version of him by far.
Yeah.
But here's the problem. On the one hand, you're right. Husky Harris should have been a career ender. And you go, well, like, so Steve Austin had Stunning Steve. He had the Ringmaster. He had blah, blah, blah. It's like, it was different then because it wasn't on television.
Yeah.
So you could fuck around with gimmicks. The Undertaker has multiples of these. Kane has multiples of these. You could fuck around and it wouldn't end your career. Husky Harris should have ended his career.
Yeah.
And it didn't. And that's a testament to how charismatic he was. And he could still go in the ring. Not as good as Harper, but he was a good hand in the ring.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, it's such an up and down career that I just can't take him any higher than this.
Again,
I wish we could have seen what he was planning next, coming back from his health issues. It was the rumors kept saying, oh, he's going to be back. I would have loved to see him with a fresh run.
Yeah.
Hopefully post-Fiend. We never will get to. I think it's fine there. And hell, he and Ambrose had a pretty good feud of their own. So right now they're sitting next to each other, and that feels okay.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about Bray for a lot longer, but we can go ahead and shift on. I kind of hit us at a dead end there. It's not really a great transition point here.
Well, literally a dead end, yes.
Yeah, you didn't have to do that.
I think rather than speed rounding, because we're going to clutter the list, I think we're going to have to revisit this at a later date. So rather than rush, I'm just going to keep tackling the big stuff, and then maybe a future one, or maybe a thing we do on the side, not in a main episode.
It's a good thing it's a good thing for me and you to pocket when everybody else isn't available. We can keep touching on this over and over again.
Right.
I'll be honest, I'm loving this. I don't get to talk about wrestling other than when it's me and you at a pay-per-view or PLE. Where we're talking about it. I would love to go over Dusty Rhodes eventually, but again, that's just going to take so much goddamn time.
It is my pick, and I'm going to pick a trio that were inseparable in the 2000s, and that is John Cena, Edge, and Randy Orton.
Oh, damn, it's not going to be Edge and the Edgeheads?
No.
Damn.
So, as I scroll through this massive list of still 280-something wrestlers, the question in my mind is there anybody else who's an icon except for John Cena? I'm actually scrolling and looking just to make sure I'm not forgetting somebody who could possibly be at that level. The only person who I think is even close is Sting, and I don't have him there.
Wow. I would argue Flair could be considered.
I think Flair could be considered, but I don't have him there. Again, a little bit of that is
being creepy?
The sloppy personal life stuff. And I got to be very honest, that last match where he faked a heart attack, I was not really a fan of that. From the sound of the reports, I don't think his family really was either. So we will get to Flair. I want to do like Flair and Macho Man and maybe Dusty, a few other old heads as we wrap up. So we'll get to that, Peter, because Flair is obviously going to be high. To me, and we'll get to the others, so you can always fight me on it. Triple H is down here too, but again, I don't think he's top. My last icon is John Cena. So, like, it's in part because of his long feuds with Edge and Orton. God knows how many times Cena and Orton fought at a fucking pay-per-view. There's a whole, like, the people have done the series of graphics of them just looking at each other on a screen where they're, at Fastlane, these two, and at Backlash, these two. And I think finally John Cena is getting his flowers now that his career is wrapping up. Yeah. It basically already has. He's lost the last handful of scant appearances he's made.
I watched him lose to Austin Theory.
Yeah, Austin Theory is icons here because of that. I think now people finally realize that, yes, in the heat of the moment, Cena wins LOL was a massive thing, and maybe they went to the well with him too often. But the man carried the entire organization on his back for more than a decade post-Attitude Era, where it would have been really easy to have one or two people in that span, if not more, fuck that up. as they just floundered around looking for some direction. Instead, it's basically 04 when the ruthless aggression era is in full swing. And again, like Kurt Angle could be in this conversation, Rey Mysterio, whatever. But these three in particular I want to touch on. So let's go Cena first.
I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this without sounding, not sounding disingenuous. You getting me back into wrestling, and then me a couple years after that deciding, let's start going to shows over and over again. Cena was on so many of those shows, and we are talking 2016, 2017-ish range. Holy fucking shit, did 12 years later, Cena was still generated a response from the crowd that was, to my experience at that point, unlike anything I have heard in my lifetime. That includes going to regular sporting events, whatever. And maybe that's because I didn't go to to the Super Bowl or whatever. Cena's "Let's Go Cena" and as in a high-pitched child's voice, and Cena sucks in a deeper adult voice is one of the funniest things that I revisit in my mind often. Because, again, more than a decade later, that man was going to elicit a response. And Cena Sucks wasn't even actually hating on Cena. It was just the counterbalance to everyone cheering for him. Because the appreciation did start there. And I think it's helped, too. He's had a pretty good acting career, which I think people have generated more of an appreciation for who he is outside the ring. All the things he's done, in terms of philanthropic things have been tremendous. But you're right. Where is the WWE if he doesn't bridge the gap from Attitude Era into the really flippy, super kicky, spammy move, fun version that we are in now?
Mm-hmm. Peter brings it up. What you just did as well. He's the number one Make-A-Wish guy, not in wrestling, in anything, in all of pop culture.
He beat me too before I could even dive into that. If you want to punish Hulk for what he's done and Vince what he's done, Cena deserves so much more appreciation, which, again, you already wanted to put him an icon. And I think even if he was just a regular guy outside the ring, I think he'd probably be an icon. But that cements it for me. In terms of the merch movement he does, the shirts he sold, how many kids loved him. There are wrestling fans now that are going to be in their teens or early 20s that are wrestling fans because of John Cena. Just undoubtedly.
Yeah.
They are fans because that man was in this company and inspired them to keep watching. And again, that's why I just don't see how you don't put him up on icon, honestly.
He was overexposed. There's no doubt about it. And a lot of that wasn't even his fault. A lot of that was Vince and the other heads of WWE at the time not trusting anybody else. So I don't know how much I can punish him for it in retrospect. I went through the era. That's maybe the time when I was most engaged is mid-2000s because I was into the video games. I was kind of choosing my own lanes in pop culture. So I remember how obnoxious it was when he won everything and never tapped out and never this and never that. I get it. But I think for all the reasons you said and more, I have him an icon. Do I wear an icon? I don't know.
That's fine.
This is the order I have them in just for the reasons we talked about. Again, if you have Stone Cold number 1, I'm not going to argue with that because he was probably the hottest act of all time. Mm. No one burned brighter than Steve Austin, but for me, Taker's 30 years adds up to more than Stone Cold's 5. That's just me. I'm not arguing. I'm not quibbling over where people are an icon.
This might be a weird comparison, but the overexposed, never loses type of thing is very Hulk Hogan-esque of Cena. And the fucking staying power on TV over and over again is very Taker-esque. Again, the pop he gets when he comes back from one of the only major injuries he's ever fucking had is one of the best pops we've ever seen.
100%. Nobody expected that at Madison Square Garden.
So that's an important part of his career. Again, he worked his ass off to get back in shape to be able to pull that off. So there's some amalgamation of a little bit of the good part of Hogan and the good part and consistency of Taker that is in Cena to, you could say overexposed, but I also look at it as, well, consistency. He's just fucking there and he's at the top of the card and he's reliable. Again, companies trying to make money. Who's going to make you more money than, we could say overexposed, but how many shirts and hats and weird wristbands that this man sell to help keep that company going? I don't know. It's easier to look at it now when he's not actively on the top of the card forever, of course.
And we could talk about Cena for 20 minutes on his own. The last thing I'll say is this. The 5 Moves of Doom was always overrated. Because what the fuck did Steve Austin do? Exactly. Again, ravaged by injuries, didn't even need it because he was so charismatic, the stories were compelling. I'm not even criticizing Stone Cold when I say that. But Stone Cold's moveset, because he could barely move, was a stunner, a sharpshooter, a Lutez press into punches, stomping in the corner, a suplex.
Yep.
And
again, you want to shit on that. Roman's got 3 moves, whatever.
Yeah. The Rock had a little bit more variation, but his main stuff was what he went to in most matches, so he didn't have a ton beyond that.
Yeah.
Taker had the most varied moveset of any of the top 4.
Yes.
But even then, you could boil it down to his 4 finishers, because he had both the Tombstone and the Hell's Gate and the Last Ride and the Choke Slam as finishers at points in his career, and Snake Eyes, and, you can boil anybody down to a certain set of signatures and whatever. And I know beyond that, Cena was real basic. That doesn't matter because unlike a Hulk Hogan, Cena had charisma out the wazoo. You can argue he might be the best promo in WWE history, and I know he's 2 spaces away from The Rock.
Yes.
But you can argue that Cena might be the best we've ever seen.
I will throw this up now just because of the nice transition between the two. I know people probably didn't like it, but Bray's weird thing with Cena, with turning Cena into NWO Cena on that shit, is also just like, John was just down for fucking anything. Later in his career, it seems like he became pretty easygoing and just was like, sure, I'll do that. I'll do that. He really did just become a company guy to, again, try to put over Austin Theory a year and a half ago, which didn't work at all. But now it's John's fault. And so it goes to the giving nature that we've seen with children. Boy, was Cena a fucking company guy, and remains a company guy to this day.
And will through retirement, clearly. The clock is rapidly ticking away. He even mentioned as much on McAfee after this last WrestleMania, where we might have a year, and that might mean 1 match at the next WrestleMania of Cena before he's gone. At least people have finally learned to appreciate him.
Yeah, and again, I think the appreciation this past 6-7 years, which as I got to live event stuff, I'm really, really thankful I got to see the back end of that career. I really am.
Why can't
you want to go to Edge?
That's why
now,
I can't
assuming.
scroll. Yeah, let's hit Edge and Orton here. Cena had 400,000 matches with Orton. We talked about it. Orton's another guy now because of his longevity that I think, and I'm talking through this now. I had to switch to the other window again. I keep having my mouse in the wrong spot. I think you can make the case for Orton in Legend. I don't think I have him there, but this is about the first time I would have considered it, because I think a lot like Cena, he also is not taking himself so seriously as his career winds towards the back half. So yes, we may not like Matt Riddle a ton, but Team RK Bro was pretty fun. We've had a lot of RK something variations, RKO with Kevin Owens, and even these two that we're talking about right now, of course, were a prominent tag team for multiple years with Edge and Randy Orton.
Yep.
I think you can make the case for him at bottom of Legend, but I think I have him top of Superstar.
You're talking about the Legend killer in Legend? Wow.
Well, then he had to kill himself, and that's suicide.
I think again, you're really correct. Again, Randy's another one where without if Cena's not there, Randy's probably in Cena's spot.
Probably.
I don't know that Randy could ever speak as well as Cena, so he probably doesn't get over in the same manner. So high up on Superstar is where I was going to put him. So I'm in lockstep with you again.
It's tough because he's a below average promo and he's not great in the ring. But here's the only thing I'll say to that: I think because of the era that Cena and Orton were in, as we were starting to see more high flyers and better technical wrestling be accepted, because it wasn't just about these big lumbering people, that they got unfairly criticized for that. Clearly, Cena and Orton doing minimalistic stuff worked because it bought them a 20-plus year career in a way that some other folks, like Edge, who did other stuff with their careers, had massive problems because of it. So I don't think you can say that Orton's not your cup of tea or your favorite because he is somewhat boring in the ring and robotic. Fine. But that's not all that wrestling is. And even though I value in-ring work rate a lot, there's no denying that Randy Orton belongs in one of these top tiers.
Yeah, and that's why it's easy to put him under Superstar and not put him up higher, because, again, I get really specific with the super draw, or you an incredible wrestler, where are we going to put you? And so, again, I think that's perfectly fine, because Randy's not working at the same rate that Seth is, for example.
No.
There's one is drastically more skilled in the ring than the other is. And Randy's probably also going to catch some flack for however long in his career for having a finisher that got him more popular, became a meme, is fucking hilarious, and all these type of things. But, I mean, all the things you said is, I'd really also give Randy credit for easing off on being a dick as his career went, because I think Randy is the example of what happens when you're like Michaels or Hogan backstage, and then we hit the internet era where people can find out that you're kind of a fucking asshole.
Yep.
Backstage. And that's the one thing of Randy's career that I think he's aged into. And again, I will give Randy a lot of credit for where Cody Rhodes is today. Because I think that early on when Cody comes up and is paired with Randy in Evolution and has a pretty strong feud with him, and I'm very much looking forward to when they're going to fucking pull the trigger on an Orton-Rhodes feud right now, which Orton's not going to win, but I think there's a lot of money in
be a smart way to buy time.
Yeah, and it's a great filler feud for maybe Survivor Series time, somewhere around there. It's going to get over. It's going to be good. It's going to probably bring the best out of Randy, who really also seems to have aged into being a fun, chill company guy who's happy to sit high mid-card, things like that. Right now, I mean, he's actually helping Cody and he's hanging out with Kevin Owens and dealing with the fucking bloodline. Like that's what his career is right now. But he came back from fucking neck fusion vertebrae surgery to come back to do that. So he didn't have to do that. But he has chosen to continue doing this where even if he's not going to be the top of the card, and I don't think Randy does that 10 years ago. I think he just says, fuck this, I'm not going to be the main guy. I'm not going to be part of it. And so I think you're right. He transitions into the Shield era of the things that Rollins can do and a handful of other people can do pretty well. Especially because while he might be a boring wrestler, we have created so many versions, Rollins being a good example of it, honestly, with the stomp and then flinging him up into the air and RKOing him. Orton thankfully had a finisher that was so exciting, it did help balance out because you never knew when the fuck he was going to do it.
Yep, and that breathed life into matches that could be otherwise drab.
So boring.
The RKO on Evan Bourne is one of those top 5-10 wrestling moves of all time.
Exactly.
And there's a few other examples he's had. I mentioned the one with Seth too. So he's got like 2 of my top 10. That means something. Because finishers are everything in wrestling. Yeah. Like it's not just a finish, it's what has everything be a satisfying conclusion.
And for what it's worth, the good transition there would have been the Wyatt family because now Orton's in line with the rest of his former Wyatt family.
Yep, and he's in the bloodline stuff at the moment too. He's all over the place. You can connect him to damn near everything on this list in some way or another, especially because of his own father and Cowboy Bob's time in WWE and everything else. So
that really speaks for someone. He's tied to Vince. He's tied to the Shield. He's tied to the Wyatt family. He's tied to the bloodline with Roman. He's tied to Cena. Just saying.
He's the connective tissue of the entire 2000s. And I don't mean just the decade. I mean the millennium to the 2000s.
And I think until right now when I just spoke that out loud, I hadn't really thought about how impactful he's remained.
And Edge might be... I have a few that are my favorite on this list. Because, look, I loved The Rock and Stone Cold. I loved The Undertaker. Edge might be my favorite, not saying best, not just overall. I felt more for his coming back than I did even Daniel Bryan, who's somebody we're not going to have time to get to today. Who's going to be like, we have all sorts of, I have a CM Punk shirt on. We're not getting him today. But Edge might be my A1 of all my favorites. And him getting to come back and sort of end more on his terms to complete a story that obviously got cut short. You know, I still remember how shocking it was when he basically has to forfeit the belt and end his career the night after WrestleMania. Like, especially because, there were dirt sheets, but they weren't quite as popular back then. Nobody saw that shit coming. We had heard whispers about Daniel Bryan when he had to retire. We did not know that was coming with Edge. So I'm really happy that he got to return. I loved the Royal Rumble moment. It's cool that he got to do a feud with Christian because obviously those guys go way the hell back. I thought about bringing him up here, but I thought I'd take this approach instead. All that said, I don't have him any higher than Draw. I know I just put the Legend Killer not in the Legend tier, and now I'm going to put the Rated R Superstar in not the Superstar tier. I know he's a many-time champion, especially with the big gold belt, and not so much the WWE Championship. But as I'm looking at who's in Superstar, I know he won a ton of tag titles, especially as Edge and Christian. I understand he's super decorated, and again, I love the guy. Good in the ring, great promos, good charisma. You have one of the all-time moments of the sex celebration with Lita that sticks out for wrestling fans of all time. I think I have him at the top of Draw. I don't think I can put him bottom Superstar.
He missed too much time of the prime of his career, not to his own fault. Well, maybe to his own fault a little bit. I don't know. You watch some of the fucking ladder matches with the Hardys and the Dudleys, and that probably didn't help. He's ending again. I mean, you already covered a lot of it, so I won't repeat it. He's able to come back and end his career in the way he is. I will also cite him as a draw for where he started as a henchman to Gangrel. And granted, I think that was placing a man that they knew probably had a bigger future into a spot where he would elevate up and elevate up and elevate up. And he did that. He climbed the ladder from a mid-card henchman guy to abandoning their, the leader of their little, group or whatever, to being you think about those matches in the early 2000s and what that represents from shit you never saw on TV before.
No, I loved those TLC matches.
Yeah, between the Hell in the Cells and the TLCs, we're going to give a lot of credit to guys for just turning over a whole new version of what wrestling was. And Edge is a massive part of it, and honestly is the best wrestler of the 6 guys that are most responsible for those TLC matches. He is the guy. He is the representative of what that could do to elevate your career, and he elevated himself up. Sure, Matt Hardy might have been able to do that, but a lot of things, outside the ring happened. And so the Edge goes through those variations. Seth Rollins has stolen this basic thing of rename yourself, fucking rename yourself, with really kind of the variations of the same type of character or personality. And Edge did that first, where he just kept calling himself slightly different variated shit of things while being a fucking great heel that people were going to basically cheer for, but he's still just a great heel out of it.
And we haven't been talking about this a ton because we'll probably do a separate list of this, but also my favorite entrance theme of all time.
Yeah, getting to be at Mania where he does the mashup of, or I guess SummerSlam and Mania. I think I've seen him twice, big time, live events, where he's got the mashup of his most well-known entrance with the Brood entrance built in is, I'll be honest, among the coolest things I've seen live for wrestling.
Yeah, I'm jealous.
Is to have done those type of entrances and bleed all of that shit that I was just saying of all the different versions of himself together at the end of his career, which sometimes people just don't acknowledge what the hell they were early on in their career. And he embraced it.
Are you going to argue anywhere else but here? Because I'll listen to it, but I can't.
No.
I love Edge. I can't put him in Superstar.
No, I would agree.
This is where I'm going to be pretty thin on my top tiers, which is why when I, with Shaq Rock and others, it's why I'm not going to give these out willy-nilly. I love Edge, and I love Daniel Bryan, and he's probably not going to Superstar either. My love of them doesn't necessarily look how affect how I'm going to look at them empirically.
If Edge's abbreviated version of his career is hitting the ratings and the popularity of the Attitude Era, then of course he's legend or icon. Unfortunately, his height of popularity was when the WWE was at its strongest. He is their main guy, and he helped carry it for a couple years, as we've already talked about. But he's also behind Cena in that way. Had missed a lot of time that Orton wasn't missing in that same exact way. It's part of why Rollins is in Superstar already. Rollins just fucking existed on TV. Here, again, he just came back way sooner than he even should have. And again, it's not Edge's fault because he sacrificed so much early in his career to make people entertained and get himself to that point, but it does cap what his highest ability or his highest ranking could be.
Yeah, I think so too. Peter says, is Chris Benoit on there? It's funny you should ask.
Yes.
He is. I don't think we'll get to him today. There's a few different problematic people we haven't gotten to. We tackled a couple, but let me scroll one more. Yeah, Benoit's here.
Yes, he is.
I have a lot to say about that. I've alluded to it a couple times in the podcast in the past. Brock Lesnar's on here, who has just vanished off the face of the earth in light of the Vince McMahon stuff. We've got a few different problematic folks on here that we'll have to get to in a future one. I do want to finish with a couple more olds, I think, as we wrap up here, because it's almost hour 20, so I don't want to spend too much more time. But I think Flair and Dusty is a good place to finish.
Okay,
if you're down.
Yeah, I think that's good. I wasn't sure how old.
I want to do Flair. Well, it might take us to 125, but I want to do Flair, Savage, and Dusty.
I will start by saying, before I really fully discovered Shawn Michaels, Macho Man was my guy. I'll just get through it. Macho Man's promos have aged so well, in some senses. Also not the best in other senses, with some of the Miss Elizabeth stuff.
Right, that's a little sketchy.
Macho Man is also just so bizarrely capped from what I think I've seen from him in the ring and my versions of him in fucking NWO age. And I had to go back and watch more of what his stuff was. And goddamn if he's not just exactly as you reference a couple of those other guys, just wrong place at a really good time in wrestling that just never let him get fully over because Hogan would not get out of the goddamn way. Macho Man is a better wrestler than Hulk Hogan, in my opinion, in so many ways. Borders on the same level of entertainment on the mic, but also doesn't have the same physique that Hogan had, didn't have the same, aura around him. To where, Randy has to be just like, draw, I think.
I can't put him that low, I don't think.
Okay.
I'm
happy to put him into superstar.
The reason being, I think, is the stuff that went on outside of the ring. And it's easy for us as youngs to think of like Bonesaw as one of those examples, which is fair and was kind of funny for what it was. It also showed off how big he had gotten by the end of his career because, he was never the tallest guy, but he had gotten pretty huge as he was winding down. I just think between like most people, I won't say most people. Actually, Jack Rock just said it, so perfect. I was going to say him and Steamboat goes down as one of like the matches that changed wrestling because it showed that these guys could go in the ring. It didn't just have to be slow and plodding and lockups and headlocks and rest holds. It was like, oh shit, look at this athleticism.
Yeah, that's perfect.
The Slim Jim stuff. We talked about untimely deaths on here. He's another one where he has a heart attack and ends up in a fucking head-on collision to where like I would have loved to have seen what he would have done maybe as a producer or just lingering around in the business. I think I have him at the bottom of superstar.
That's totally fine. Again, I'm happy with that. I like him more than I sit here shitting on and critiquing the 80s over and over again. And Macho Man's the guy from there where I'm like, well, shit, if that's what we were going to do in the mid 80s and things like that, holy shit, that's just a great example of what we were going to get to one day.
Mm-hmm. I just think it can't be higher than Hulk or Andre, even with Hulk's pervasive problems that we've already mentioned multiple times. Can't put him above Hulk Hogan. But, like, I think he was another one of those larger-than-life guys. He was just, like you said, at the wrong time. Because Flair, who we can talk about here, manages to get over on his own just because he's in different territories. And even then, when he gets to the bigger shows like WCW, WWF, I mean, he is the record holder for title defense or title reigns that it doesn't look like anymore like Cena's going to tie. I thought for a long time they were going to give that to him. It's that John Cena would be the modern day record holder for a number of title reigns, and there's no way he's going to win it now.
Nope.
After losing like 6 straight matches and putting people over, that would be so weird. So like Flair is also sort of a right place, wrong time, I guess.
Because if Flair is Flair, I mean, maybe he doesn't get over and have as many title reigns. If Flair is Flair in even let's go like mid 2000s, like his 80s version. All those promos and things like that, Flair's an icon. If his character in his title reigns exist when we're on TV, when we're making all this money, when wrestling's as popular as it is, Flair's, I would put him an icon. It's just bizarre because he helps it get there. Again, I'm way more behind Flair than I am Hogan for what he did for the sport or I guess wrestling as an existence. I would credit Flair with a lot more of that. Because there's a lot more Flair moments I can think of that I'm like, holy shit, that was cool, than there are Hogan ones. If I'm being really honest. Mm-hmm. And so I've got Flair over Hulk.
The ending of his career, which to me is super kick, I'm sorry, I love you.
Exactly.
And nothing else happens after that.
Yeah.
To me, he has to be in legend. I can't put him in icon.
Okay, good.
For the reasons you've said. He has a case, and again, maybe I'm not as big a fan of what's happened the last few years, but to me, because his personal life isn't riddled with the massive red flags that Hulk Hogan's is, like, there's a little bit of womanizing stuff, but that was also his character, so that line always blurred. Evolution's another massive stable we haven't really mentioned yet. Orton, obviously, we talked about.
We'll get to that with Batista.
I think he's the tippy top of legend. I even have him above Shawn Michaels. You may take issue with that.
No,
but
I agree. Not like I like Flair more than Michaels, but I think that it's a pretty big disservice if we don't give him credit. Because, again, if I'm really looking hard at it for the 80s and all that, Flair is the guy I would pick. If I had to pick one from that early pre-TV, pre-Attitude Era, I mean, because I got into WCW first, and guess who was still really popular with the Four Horsemen back then?
Yep.
So I was introduced to Flair as being a legend to me in like 1995 when I'm 5 years old. That's who I saw. How many fucking people were using the figure 4? I was going to get to it with Macho Man with the elbow off the top rope. Again, it's a big thing that Bayley does. She obviously had some very Macho Man-esque things. Woods. There are, and again, you create new moves. Guys get basic moves. They get done. But those are still moves that are out there, and they are credited to this person. That stupid figure 4 is a big fucking deal. Now it helps that his daughter obviously is a major wrestler to this day too.
Sure.
But yes, Flair's the guy. If you're looking at 80s wrestling, to me, it's Ric Flair. That's so I'm happy with him being there. I don't mind it at all.
I think he's tippy top of legend, just because I think my icon list cuts off exactly here.
Probably.
Because they are the ones who could do everything. And Flair was very good in the ring at his time, was one of the best promos ever, as Shaq Rock alluded to, had the aura about him. He wasn't, so like, he was never the biggest guy. He was never the size of a Hulk Hogan or anything, but he still had that mystique about him because he was the wheel and deal and kiss steal and, like Jets and all this shit, Rich, which even the $1 Million Man didn't pull off to the same extent, weirdly enough, even though that was like his whole gimmick. So I have Flair top of legend, even above Shawn Michaels. No disrespect to HBK, but
and maybe I'm wrong in this since I only watched X amount of matches. Holy shit, could Ric Flair sell?
Yeah, definitely the best for his era, no question.
I give so much fucking credit for over the top selling and things like
the face flop that Shaq Rock mentioned.
Exactly.
I was gonna bring up,
Thank you. That's
over
perfect.
the turnbuckle, which Triple H started doing more after he got an Evolution.
Because I feel like Flair helped us not take wrestling so fucking seriously.
As did, by the way, as a chance to segue, as we're getting late on time here, so did Dusty Rhodes.
Yes.
Some of his most famous clips from back in the day are like him doing the bionic elbow to people and them staggering around and him dancing with them as they stagger. And
I like that. If we want, wrestling is like carny shit, really, at its heart.
Always has been.
Yes.
So I think Dusty's a hard one because I did not see a lot of his work. Like you, I've seen plenty of Hogan because he was around still. I've seen plenty of Flair because he was around still. I know Dusty was around in the 90s and obviously then had a different presence with NXT and stuff later on. So it's difficult for me to put him somewhere. I know, like Shaq Rock, for example, would advocate probably for a high icon or legend. I do think, in a weird way, Cody has done a lot of work in making it so that Dusty's mystique continues to endure because, by God, everybody who faces him has a fucking Dusty Rhodes story. But like we said with Luke Harper, it's another guy that no one had anything bad to say about in an industry where everybody has some skeletons in their closet, and some of those skeletons are full-on fucking demons.
How much do we dock for the fact that, to Cody's entire fucking character right now, Dusty just couldn't win? No company ever felt that he was going to be big enough to put as their superstar or as their main draw. No one wanted to do that. He was always.
I can't put him in legend. He's a legend in every sense of the word, but in the framework of this tier list, because it was also part of his thing, like it helped his underdog status. Yes. So in a way, like
he was better chasing.
He always needed to chase, and that's sort of how I think we ended up with an extra year of Cody Roman because chase. You want your baby faces chasing, you don't want him holding the title. So I don't know how much I hold it against him. I think you're right. I think it's a small demerit because, fair or not, right or not, he didn't have the heights that a Ric Flair or a Hulk Hogan did. But I'm pretty comfortable putting him somewhere in Superstar.
Thank you. That's where I wanted it. Again,
because look, the people in Superstar are legends, zero question, in the grand sense of how like the WWE describes them and just overall. There's no doubt about it. But as far as this tier list goes, if we're trying to be, picky as far as who makes it up on these highest tiers, I would put him like here, maybe under Andre. I don't know. Or maybe I like having Hulk and Andre together. So like there, in Superstar, that's where I have him.
I think I'm really looking back at Dusty's body type. He was never gonna get.
No, it just wasn't the right fit for that time.
Yeah, he was never gonna get the larger than life.
Flair, even though he wasn't a huge steroid guy, was super fucking handsome, suave. Like he had all those other intangibles. You're right, Dusty didn't.
Dusty was so perfect for what wrestling was at the territories when his promos were crucial to get a live crowd behind him, to get people to want to cheer for someone, and then go home disappointed when he didn't do it.
Which is what Shaq Rock said earlier. I was waiting to bring it up till we talked about him, but you can argue Dusty's the best promo guy ever. I didn't mention him earlier, but
absolutely.
He's up there.
And that's why I'm happy he's placed above Randy Savage, who again is a good promo, but almost everything that Savage did that was entertaining, I think Dusty did just a little bit, if not significantly better.
Because Randy Savage's were unintentionally funny. Well, he was also funny than people gave him credit. So let's say it was a mix. Whereas Dusty was all about selling people, get behind him, and he loses. And it's almost harder to do that when you have to keep selling people yourself and keep losing.
Yeah. So guess what? He's the epitome of what wrestling was. Again, I just have a lot more of appreciation for what he could do with his body type and the lack of being a natural draw like Andre was. Granted, again, Andre was an American. Andre couldn't speak English as well. So we never know what Andre would have been doing if maybe he was speaking in French all the time. But, and again, I don't know how much we talk about outside the ring things. Seth Rollins isn't Seth Rollins without Dusty.
No.
Roman Reigns is not Roman Reigns.
20 to 30 people that are going to be on this list, and more to be clear, but like 20 to 30 notable people had their career trajectories altered in a good way by Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah, NXT would not. I don't even know if NXT exists today without Dusty. It might have just flamed out and been canceled.
A lot of the women wrestlers too, by the way. Also
I was just going to say
him in super endearing terms.
Where Sasha is, or Mercedes, I guess. Bailey, I think, is like a perfect example of someone who is like the epitome of Dusty's character for her big run of NXT before actually getting the belt. Alexa Bliss is a big part of that. Mm-hmm. I think where early on Carmella, I don't know how much Liv got to work with him, but there are so many fucking women wrestlers that came in from indies and things like that, got put into this NXT box, and Becky Lynch, is another one. I can't imagine Becky can speak as well as she could without Dusty being around there. I'm so happy with where wrestling is today, and so much of it is owed to Dusty, and that's not even acknowledging Cody's up and down career and then rise up to what he is now.
Mm-hmm. Who's another guy we'll have to tackle in a future episode. Yeah. Another interesting one to rank.
Like, and then you look back at, you already touched on it with how many people have these nice things to say about Dusty. For Dusty to do all of that and help so many fucking people is like the best example of how much he loved this goddamn business.
Yep.
To, again, lose, and then go out there and get fiery in a promo over and over and over again. I would argue that I don't know if anyone in the fucking history of the world has ever loved professional wrestling as much as Dusty Rhodes.
And you could argue he has the biggest impact of anybody on this list.
And that
because Hulk Hogan didn't love the industry. Hulk Hogan loved Hulk Hogan.
Hogan, exactly. Dusty gave to so many people, and then created again. Finally, we're getting to see it. A very talented son who has done so well to be able to carry on his dad's legacy and give back. And again, I mean, some of my favorite shit was Heyman and Cody talking about Dusty. That was pre the last WrestleMania, and I'm like, holy shit, man, this is just so good.
Mm-hmm.
And to see everyone have that appreciation for him, I'm really glad we could put him up in Superstar, even if, again, his in-ring stuff isn't going to match a lot of what these other people have done. He was even earlier on, realistically, than some of these other guys, but it's just, he's so fucking important.
And last thing I'll say, because we're over, is if you don't think that him being heavyset was a factor in him not ever rising to the top, Kevin Owens was dealing with that shit in like 2017. Still.
Exactly.
2017, we were still fat-shaming wrestlers for not being the perfect body type. Dusty Rhodes was 30-plus years before that.
Yeah.
So
Dusty would have struggled to get to high mid-card now with everything that we already spoke about. He would have struggled to get to that point just because of where he's at. Again, Kevin's only hung around the top of the card because Kevin's funny. Just very honestly, Kevin's such a funny promo and is willing to do sick, twisted shit in all of his matches. It's helped him get over, but he's had to work extra hard because of that body type.
Yep. So the list is a little top-heavy, but it's because we focused on some of the biggest names, and there's still a ton down there. Like Batista, I scrolled past as we were talking about the other SmackDown guys like Orton, Cena, and Edge, and all that jazz. So we'll have to get this in a future one. I didn't even feel like speedrunning was appropriate because we got to 4, 8, 14, 17, 18, 19, 22 of the 300 on this list. Now, a lot of these down here are not going to warrant that much discussion, but there are several others that are going to make at least one more episode worthwhile. So where the fuck does Bob Backlund go? I don't know. We'll find out later. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll close out quick here because we went long. Yeah, if you're around Track Rock, by all means join in because it's nice having the older perspective. I know it sounds like I'm being like, oh, ageist. I don't mean it that way. Just like for longer ago eras than we were around for, even though we know our history pretty well, it's different. So hopefully like the challenge tier list, the passion of how much we care about this stuff more than we probably should comes across. Thank you, Peter, for watching as well. Thanks to everybody else who tuned in. Thank you for watching or listening. In between episodes, you can find us at our website, grayareas.live or youtube.com/@grayareaslive. Tune into the podcast live on Tuesday nights. You can join us as well. We will see you next time.